Today on Locked On Red Wings, draft profiles on Cole Eiserman and Konsta Helenius with Prashanth Iyer of Expected by Whom.
You're Locked On Red Wings, your daily podcast on the Detroit Red Wings. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to the Locked On Red Wings podcast. We are your hosts, Brian Fisher and Scotty Bentley. I'm a former broadcast producer for 97.1 The Ticket, where Scotty's the host over at Locked On Tigers, as well as a freelance journalist for the Detroit News. And on today's episode, we are happy to be joined by Prashanth Iyer, host of Expected by Whom, and a social media analytics savant, as we like to claim him to be. And he's going to help us do a draft profile on Cole Eiserman and Konsta Helenius, two of the more notable prospects in the upcoming draft, especially if you're a Red Wings fan. Prashanth, thank you for joining us. How are you doing, man?
You guys got it. I'm doing well. Just ready to knock out a few more of these draft profiles and get everybody ready for the draft in a couple weeks.
I got to say, last summer you showed up in a tank top and it was like 100, and I'm slightly disappointed by the attire this time around.
You know, I realized there were a lot of comments on the video last time, and so I felt like I would dial it back a little bit just to save your show.
Thank you.
Now at this point, I feel like it'd be sabotaged.
Right. Well, you draw everybody to your show, right? So you're doing us a favor, right?
Exactly.
I think you had said at the time you had just finished like a boxing session or something like that, and it was really hot, so you were just in a tank top, like drenched in sweat for the episode. It's so great. And then he comes on, top tier analytical content, right, just drenched in. It was amazing.
You know, you find a way to tune it, and so I had to shift from boxing and then whatever else I was doing that day, and then dial it back to whoever we need to talk about. But today, much more refined, much more professional, just for your show.
Love it. Before we can get to either of those two profiles, I want to let you guys know that today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com right now to get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. I also want to thank you guys for making Locked On Red Wings your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And Prashanth, without further ado, it's one of my favorite sayings. I just love to say without further ado when I don't have a clever segue into things. Let's just talk right about Cole Eiserman. This is a guy who Red Wings fans have been in a fever about since he kind of burst onto the scene last year. Last year, he was thought to be maybe a top 5 pick at one point. And of course, the main reason Red Wings fans love the kid is his last name is pronounced, even though it's spelled very differently, is pronounced just like Red Wings legend Steve Yzerman. You know, there's a lot of hype surrounding Cole Eiserman, and just to put it bluntly, does he live up to that hype in your opinion?
You know, he's a fascinating player to watch because you just look at the numbers. He sets the U.S. National Development Program goal record. So when you say that, you've already chased down Cole Caulfield, you've chased down Austin Matthews, you've chased down all the guys that have come through there, and he set the record. He's also one of the youngest players in the draft. He's got an August 29th birthday, barely 2 weeks from being ineligible for this year's draft. So he would be, in the following year's draft if he was born on September 16th. So it's just, he's one of the youngest players and has that kind of repertoire. And then you just watch him play, and he's got one of the most electric shots. He can score from anywhere. He's game-breaking talent, elite player kind of in one-on-one situations. But what you struggle with as you watch him more and more is that consistency from shift to shift, from night to night, and being able to kind of power through and bring some other element when the goal scoring is not going your way. And that's probably the most frustrating thing about Cole Eiserman when you watch him is, he's got this elite game-breaking talent, but when that A game is not clicking, what does the B game look like? And right now, the B game for a lot of people, and myself included, is not good enough. It's simply lacking in the ability to focus in on those details, the back-checking, the skating, the compete, the physicality, all of those other things you need to be able to bring when you don't have the A game, for me right now, aren't there. That's not to say they can't get there. I already stated he's one of the youngest players in the draft, but that's kind of where the dilemma is when people are evaluating him.
Well, that does kind of transition into my question, and not to have you repeat yourself. If that is the answer, then that's the answer. But like you had mentioned, right, some of the players that he has had better seasons than. You've mentioned the top end talent. You know, if you only talk about the good, this is a guy that when you're told about him for the first time, you go, okay, this is a top 5, top 3 pick in the draft, and across the board, and he fluctuates sometimes and, you know, mock to mock, but across the board, like he's kind of closer to that 10 range, you know, give or take 2 or 3 picks, even on either side of 10. And I guess that is kind of my question is that it? Like, is it just the, you know, when there's not the goal scoring or maybe inconsistency from, like you said, shift to shift, game to game? Like, is that really the biggest thing single-handedly that's kind of holding him back?
Yeah, I mean that's exactly it. Is the single-handed thing that's stopping him is when he can't beat people with his one-on-one talent, when he can't get to areas where he can get a shot off, when the puck isn't going in the net for him. There are just not other elements of his game that are contributing in a substantially positive, you know, manner that allows for that one singular elite talent to stand alone. And you know, if you go and you read a lot of the scouting reports, and there's been a lot of great profiles on him because he's been in the media for such a long time now. You know, people are talking about, well, is this a Kiefer Bellows, Oliver Wahlstrom, Alexander Holtz type player where they've got that electric shot but aren't bringing much else to the game? You know, Alex Holtz is a guy when he was coming around, same draft as Lucas Raymond. A lot of people were talking about which one of those Swedish wingers was better, with Holtz being that dynamic goal scorer. And people talking, well, you know, if he was playing in the CHL, he would score 70. He's struggling to crack New Jersey right now, and it's still struggling. And meanwhile, we're seeing a very well-rounded Lucas Raymond bring so much talent forward. And I'm not saying that that's a direct comparison here, but that's your concern with Cole Eiserman is beyond the shot, beyond that elite one-on-one talent. Can he round out the rest of his game enough to be able to contribute when the puck's not going in the net? And that's what you're worried about right now.
Well, and you and I, we were talking when we were waiting for Scotty to hop on. You and I were talking a little bit about the fit, because one of the big things I was saying is I'm not necessarily sure that those flaws that you have pointed out in his game, while he may be a dynamic goal scorer and just elite in that category, Eiserman seems to be building a team around a two-way game, defensive depth. It's something that he's talked on end about, especially at the end of season availability. We need to get better defensively. And I was like, I'm not sure if the fit is there with him. And you brought up a good point, but that was the perfect reason for the counter argument, is that because they don't have a lot of that dynamic quality to their goal scoring, that would be a reason maybe they would go after him. Could you expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, I think it comes down to, you know, when you see how NHL teams are constructed, not every player is going to play the same way, right? You have the ability to kind of blend or mesh different talents, different skill sets, different strengths together to lead to a team that is greater than its individual parts. And I think a team that does a tremendous job of that is Florida. A team that's done a tremendous job of that is Boston. You know, you look at the way Boston had been prior, you know, when Patrice Bergeron's there, you talk about a very defensively responsible team, but you also talk about a team that features David Pastrnak, who has this game-breaking ability to score goals and kind of bring things in. And that's what you're hoping a guy like Cole Eiserman could be, is you add a guy like that to a team that you've been building this defensive first approach. You've got defensively responsible players already in Dylan Larkin and Lucas Raymond. You've got guys in the prospect pool like Marco Kasper and Nate Danielson that sort of project similarly. And then you add in this potential game-breaking talent. And if he can round out the rest of his game to be able to play the style, you've now added a piece that you just don't have. And frankly, you're not going to be able to find in free agency or trades. I mean, you just don't get guys that score 127 goals in 119 games, you know, in the U.S. national program. Like, those guys aren't just readily available. So being able to add that in, taking that gamble on that elite talent and hoping that he can develop the rest of his game, that is something Detroit does not have. and is not likely to find, very easily without paying a massive premium, whether it's through trade or free agency.
Awesome. We're going to take a quick break. When we return, we'll wrap up the conversation on Cole Eiserman before getting to Konsta Helenius in segments 2 and 3. So stay tuned for that and more with Prashanth Iyer on Locked On Red Wings. Got to talk to you guys today about FanDuel. Summertime means baseball, the NBA Finals, and hey, the Stanley Cup Finals are still ongoing as Edmonton was able to prolong that by another game. And you can find and bet on that all at FanDuel. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $200 you can use to bet on everything from the Finals MVP to the Conn Smythe to who's going to hit one out of the park. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and add a big win to your summer bucket list. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Welcome back. Segment 2, Locked On Red Wings podcast. We're joined by Prashanth Iyer, host of Expected by Whom, and we're rapping a little bit about Cole Eiserman right now. I think I had the last question before we headed to break, so Scotty, I'm going to toss it back to you here for whatever you got next.
Yeah, honestly, just straight up, is he going to be there when the Wings pick? I think that's like the next natural progression, right? Because again, so many mocks, majority of them, have him going before the Wings selection just because, as you mentioned, the upside is just so painfully obvious. And I think that is just naturally the next question here is, what by the time the Wings pick, is he still going to even be on the board?
Yeah, it's a great question. So for folks paying attention, the Bob McKenzie draft list tends to be the most accurate as it pertains to the first round in terms of where guys are going to end up going. We haven't gotten Bob's end of year list. At midseason, Cole Eiserman was 4. So unless there's been a substantial drop in Bob's list, there's a chance someone does take that, gamble on the talent. The other guy who's been relatively accurate the last couple of years is Corey Pronman over at The Athletic. He was on top of Uri Slavkovsky going first overall and Shane Wright dropping to 4th. In that draft, and has been relatively accurate. In his latest mock, he has Cole Eiserman at 17. And so there's a chance that he is going in the late teens. And I think when you look at some of the guys that he's going up against, guys that are either centers, guys that have more well-rounded games at the same position, there may be a chance that teams end up passing on that talent if they don't think they can develop the rest of his game. And so it's really hard to say one way or another. I think Bob's list, when he comes out with it, will give us the best indication of where everybody's feeling. But it's anybody's guess, and that's why you're profiling him here today, is because he very well could be there at 15, or he could be sliding in at 13, and Steve could have the same mindset that we just talked about, where, hey, let's we don't have this in our system. We think we can develop the rest of that game. Let's go get him and even consider trading up. So definitely somebody to be aware of.
Yeah, and I mean, just to harken back to the little conversation you and I had before we started recording, like, I'm not super high on him just based on what I think, what I like to think that Eiserman is looking for. Of course, I'm not in the front office, and I always say, thank God I'm not, because that would be a disaster. But, that there is something really to be said about the fact that they have like one of the best prospect pools in the NHL. So they're well positioned there at 15 to maybe take a swing on a guy who has a tremendous offensive upside. Plus, like, there is, not that this would be the reason you take a guy like this, but he's also extremely close to home, right? He, with this last year, is with the USNTDP. He's going to Boston University, and committed to play in Boston University in 25-26. So you got another year of him with the USNTDP, I think, the United States Development Program in Plymouth. So you can keep a close eye and be really hands-on with his development as well. So I think that's there's something to be said about that as well. But again, you're not making a decision based on that. But it would be a nice little perk if they did. But just the ability to maybe take a swing on somebody that they normally wouldn't, because they've got that cabinet so full of that two-way game already, is a nice ability to have. In fact, we saw that a little bit last year, right? They took Nate Danielson, who's got a pro-style game, two-way game at that. He played really well at WHL, but then at pick 17, they took Axel Sandin Pellikka, who offensive first D-man. They took a swing on a guy because their defensive cabinet's already really full. So like there is a little bit, I won't say there's a precedent for it, but we've seen in the past, they're not afraid to take swings every once in a while.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, it comes down to if you're going to take him, can you turn him from, or can you turn him from what he is right now into a David Pastrnak, or is he going to end up as a Kiefer Bellows? And
Yeah.
that's the variance, right? And that's the variance to Cole Eiserman that makes him so difficult to analyze and project. Because if you can take him and turn him into a David Pastrnak, you've got a league MVP candidate. If you can't, then you potentially have a guy that can't stick in the NHL level. And so that's your concern here. And that's just, again, it's do you want to take that swing or not? Somebody's going to, and somebody may very well get a mid-round gem, or they may get a guy that can't build the rest of his game out to be able to stay on the ice.
Anything else on
and with
Eiserman? I'm good if you
nope,
guys are good.
I was just about to transition. If you guys are good. Cool.
Oh, good.
Awkward transition out of the way. Konsta Helenius is on. Again, I do my favorite thing. I read the Elite Prospects page because this is a guy from Finland who I know very little about in all reality. But this is somebody that Prashanth himself said that he would like to talk about on this episode. He is a center / right wing according to Elite Prospects, 5'11", 190 pounds. He shoots right, and he had a really good season in LIIGA, which is if I'm recalling correctly, the top pro league in Finland this past year. 36 points in 51 games, 14 goals, 22 assists, and he lit it up on the international stage as well. He had 11 points in 13 games with the U20 team at International World Juniors, and then at the World Championship, he had 4 points in 5 games. So, Prashanth, when it comes to Konsta Helenius, just purely simple strengths and weaknesses, what draws you to him?
Yeah, I mean, we couldn't be talking about two players that are more polar opposites. So, when you watch Konsta Helenius play, he's one of the smartest players. And really the word I use when you watch his film and you kind of dig into his game is he's just clever. It's a lot of little tricks. It's a lot of little things in the way he positions his body, the angles he takes when he's skating in the offensive zone, the routes he takes on the back check. It's just a lot of small details that he does at a really high level. And he's a guy that's developed so quickly from a cerebral standpoint. I mean, he's been playing in LIIGA, since he was 16 years old, played 33 games there last year, played the full season there this year, one of the 5 best scoring seasons ever from a draft eligible player coming out of LIIGA, not far behind Alexander Barkov. So he's a highly, highly intelligent player that has already been playing the center position, against men, centering a top line. Towards the end of the season for his team in LIIGA, he was playing, 19, 20 minutes a night, getting power play time. So a guy who's very clearly, established himself at that level. The question that you're going to run into with Helenius is, does he have that dynamic component to his game? Can he beat people one-on-one at the next level? Can he bring some elite tool, there? So that's the question mark to him is are you going to get that offensive game transition? People have been saying, is this guy a top line center? Is he potentially a second line center? Or is he a guy that can't stick at center because he's 5'11", 185 pounds, and he ends up getting punted over to wing? So, those are probably your biggest question marks right now. But if you are looking at him, you're probably looking at the most intelligent player in the draft.
So with Eiserman, we consistently talked about the upside. That was the big selling point. So I guess my question here is really for you to just tell me if this is completely off base, the statement I'm about to say. Eiserman seems to be more of high ceiling, low floor. This seems to be more of high floor, maybe not low ceiling, but question mark of a ceiling. Is that a fair assessment or is that off base?
I think that's a very fair assessment. I think, at worst, you're probably looking at a third line center or third line winger. This guy's going to make the NHL. I see, he's too intelligent not to. The question is, though, can he be a dynamic player in the NHL? And that's what we don't know. You look at a guy like Anton Lundell, who is one of the recent great Finnish, players to come out of LIIGA, and he's been able to be successful at the NHL level, but, largely in a third line center role on a albeit on a Cup championship team. I mean, whenever Florida locks this thing up. So, is that what you're going to get from Helenius? Maybe. What you're hoping for is potentially even more so. And so that's what I don't know right now. So I do think calling him a high floor player is fair. It's just you're sort of taking him and hoping he can continue to develop his game. And to his credit, he's done that over the last year and a half, and he is one of the younger players in the draft with a May birthday. So there's a lot of excitement around him. It's just, does he have that next gear?
Okay, we're going to take another quick break. And when we return, I want to flip yet another question on its head, because we're just talking about how Cole Eiserman and Helenius are polar opposites. So I'm going to flip one of my earlier questions again on its head in terms of Helenius. And so stay tuned for that and more in segment 3 of Locked On Red Wings. Got to talk to you guys today about Policygenius. A lot of life is unpredictable, but a good life insurance plan gives your family a financial safety net to protect against some of the unknowns. Policygenius is the country's leading online insurance marketplace. It makes choosing the right policy for your family easy and quick. With Policygenius, you can find life insurance policies that start at just $292 per year for $1 million of coverage. Some options are 100% online and let you avoid unnecessary medical exams. Policygenius helps you easily compare your options from America's top insurers in just a few clicks. Their award-winning agents can even walk you through the process step by step. Your work life insurance policy may not offer you enough protection for your family's needs, or even worse, it may not come with you if you leave your job. But Policygenius has no incentive to recommend one insurer over another, so you can trust their guidance. They have over thousands of 5-star reviews on Google and Trustpilot from customers who found the best fit for their needs. Get peace of mind by finding the right life insurance policy with Policygenius. Head to policygenius.com or click the link in the description to get your free life insurance quotes and see how much you could save. That's policygenius.com. Segment 3, Locked On Red Wings podcast. We are joined by Prashanth Iyer, again, of the Expected by Whom podcast. Go check that out when you guys get the opportunity. You had a really interesting interview earlier this week, and I want to ask you about that at the end of the episode. Because I just find like the analytics side of the game is just fascinating. But before we get to that, we got to finish the profile on Helenius. And one of the things I wanted to spin on its head is, I had just asked in segment 2 about how with Cole Eiserman, he doesn't really fit what the Red Wings are trying to build for, because they typically are going for those playmaking two-way forwards who have the pro-style floor, but the ceiling's kind of a question mark. And the last 2 years, they've filled that need, right? Marco Kasper, Nate Danielson. So my question now, is there such thing as too much of a good thing in Helenius by taking another guy who kind of projects, not that every player is one for one, right? They're not all the same, but kind of projects the same way?
I think you'll find people that say that. But I think we have to remember how quickly the roster can turn itself on its head. So, at the time that shortly after Moritz Seider was drafted, the Red Wings were, quote unquote, loaded right shot defensemen. You had Filip Hronek there, you had Moritz Seider, you had a couple other, they had taken Antti Tuomisto, who's their big right shot defenseman. They had, a couple other guys in the system, and you were going, yeah, the right side of the defense is really, really well stocked. Well, we fast forward 2 years, 3 years, and that's not the case at all now. And so I think we have to remember that there's guys that are not going to pan out. There are roster moves that are going to get made that will potentially lead to needs being different as soon as a year from now. And so where Detroit's currently at is, and where they're drafting, they're sort of still in a position to take the best player available to them, particularly when it's a center that can slide over to wing if needed. Because if I were to make a case, I think the most important need for Detroit is a play driving forward, whether it's a center or a winger. I think play driving forward is going to be the most important thing there. So to my eye, I don't think that there's too much of a good thing in, from this perspective, I do think Helenius has at least comparable, if not slightly higher ceiling than potentially Marco Casper here, just comparing those two drafts.
Well, when again, we have been talking about a lot of mocks so far. Obviously he's going to be at least somewhat near where the Wings pick. That's why, again, as you said earlier, we're talking about him today. But whether it's him in a vacuum or comparing and contrasting him and Eiserman together, just where do you see? I guess my question is just really directly, if either of these two guys are drafted by the Wings on draft night, what is your immediate reaction?
I think you're excited if either of them are drafted. Again, we talked about Eiserman already having a skill that the Wings don't have in their prospect pool. You're going to have to temper the expectations to realize there's a lot of work that needs to go into his game, and he's probably not making the roster in the next 1 to 2 years. I think that has to immediately be stated that there's a lot of development that needs to happen. He's going to go to BU. He's got to build out the rest of his game. Same thing if you take Helenius, you're talking about you've taken one of the most intelligent players in the draft. And, I want everyone to very carefully listen to the words that I use here, because I'm not making a direct comparison, but it is when you watch him play and you see all the clever little things he does, it reminds me of late stage Zetterberg. When you were watching him kind of use all of it, the way he positioned his body, the way he took those angles, the way where even when his back had failed to the point where he wasn't the skater he was still able to be an effective player just because he was so smart and always in the right position. I think Helenius has some of those traits. I am not making a direct comparison, but
Prashanth,
you're going to be very excited in the way that he sees the game as a player. And so it's just, can his offense translate to give you what a Zetterberg gives you? And obviously Zetterberg's defensive game, I think, was well ahead of where Helenius is at the current point. But that's your question is, okay, can he now, as smart of a player as he is and being in the right position, can he then build out the rest of that game and build out some sort of dynamic quality to score 40 goals in the NHL? That I don't know. I don't know that's there, but that's what you're sort of hoping for. So either way, you walk away with one of these two guys, you're happy from draft night.
I'm going to make sure that I clip this for sure without the context so that people hear just you making a direct comparison between Helenius and Zetterberg.
Yep, you heard it here first, everyone.
Remember, I didn't say the word Henrik. I said Zetterberg, so I could very well be comparing him to Alex Zetterberg, who's in this year's draft. So
that's true.
Prashanth, talk to us a little bit about Expected by Whom, which you host with Sean Shapiro. You guys had a really interesting interview on earlier this week, and you've interviewed huge names like Jake Woolman as well. Can you talk? I don't know where Carter Mazer came from in that mind right there, but Jake Woolman as well. Talk to us a little bit about that, because that was a really fascinating conversation that you had earlier this week.
Yeah. One of the things we've tried to do with Expected by Whom is take a very different approach to profiling kind of people in the hockey world, and, really spending some time understanding the people who do the data analysis, and then how people who we traditionally view as hockey guys use data in their life, and sort of blur the lines, because there's so much conversation around how these things are two distinctly separate entities. And there's not really an understanding of, hey, everybody uses all of this. Like it's all there. And we don't spend enough time talking about who people are. We view them as these athletes and put them up on these pedestals, but we don't spend the time to understand who they are as people. And then the same thing, we don't spend the time to understand how, data or analysis or analytics are all fitting into how they're approaching the game. So that's really the angle we've taken. And, we've had a lot of fun guests. You mentioned Jake Wallman. We've had the Stars assistant general manager, Mark Janko, on, who actually peeled back the layer and told us, what does a capologist do? And you find out some of the most fascinating information, like how does a 3-team trade come together? We've had Eric Tulsky, who's now the interim general manager for the Carolina Hurricanes. He's been on our show. We've had Sam Ventura, who's over in Buffalo, and a lot of other cool people that have just spent the time really talking to us. We've got another fun one coming up, at the end of this week with I don't want to spoil it yet, but it's a head coach of a professional hockey team who gives us the insights on how you build a winning culture on a team that can win, 3 straight championships, something that hadn't been done in the league before. So it's all fun. We have a lot of fun going through it.
That's awesome. I know, right? A couple of crumbs there for people to start looking into. Prashanth, where can people find your stuff? Like not just Expected by Whom, but all your other work that you do constantly.
The most of it will end up on Twitter in some fashion or another. It's really hard to pin me down to actually sit down and write, but I am in the process of finishing up my If I Were Steve Eiserman series that I like to do every year. I have a free Substack. You don't have to pay any money or anything for it. You just this way it keeps the people who actually want to see it. But it'll be up there hopefully by beginning of next week, and so that'll have a few thousand words for people that need something to I guess power through the week in chunks. Otherwise, that's pretty much where everything's going to be. It's either going to be on a Substack, it's going to be on the podcast, or it's going to be on Twitter. Not too many places.
How long until you're the next online analytics guru to become general manager of a professional hockey team? That's what I want to know.
Hard pass. I'm going to say, number one, I think you have to have the humility to understand just how complicated it is at the NHL level, and even just at AHL or other leagues. Like the amount that goes into doing that, it's not an easy thing to peel back. But then the second thing is I also have no interest in doing that at that level. So even if the opportunity was presented, wouldn't be anything for me.
When is the Brian Fisher Elite Prospects profile breakdown happening?
Yeah, that one, I don't know.
I don't think I'm eligible for the draft.
I don't know either. Well, it's sad because it says on his page he's retired. That's the saddest part.
It's a shame. That's a shame.
I did score again on Sunday, so maybe it's time to unretire
I shouldn't have
me.
brought it up.
Maybe you just reactivate the profile. They have a little link on the Elite Prospects website where you can send them a message with your stats. So
the profile was created without my knowledge. Somebody sent me the link one day. I'm like, yeah, that's me, because I played 3. No one wants to hear the story. Nobody cares. I played 3 games subbing in for a junior, low junior team. So it's Scotty's favorite ongoing joke that I have an Elite Prospects page. He likes to bring it up whenever he has the opportunity.
Yeah, because it's hilarious.
Why wouldn't you? That's that's almost how you would lead the conversation. So when you're looking for your next gig or your next role, you just sort of say, "Hey, I have an Elite Prospects page," and you print it out as a part of it's the cover letter of the CV, right? So
the best
don't
part
even
is
have a resume. Just straight up and be like, by
just
the way,
link.
Yeah, right.
By the way, I'm kind of a big deal.
The best part is the information's not even correct, because I played 4 games. It says I played 3. It also attributes a goal to me that I never scored. So
don't question it.
You shouldn't say that out loud. You should never have said that. You should cut that.
Actually,
I'm not cutting it.
Audits all of this, and you had Sean Shapiro on the show already. Yeah, so now he's on the journal staff over there. Now you've just gotten yourself short of a goal.
Well, and the thing is, I wonder if it was on the box score that after the game that I had scored a goal there, and I never caught it before. But it doesn't matter. This is a tangent nobody cares about, so we can end it. Thank you, Scotty, for bringing up my embarrassing secret again. Prashanth, thank you again for coming on the podcast. I really appreciate it. We really appreciate it. And helping us cover 2 of the bigger names that the Red Wings may pursue in the draft.
You got it. And Scotty, just for next year, I'll come up with a better outfit for you.
All right. I'm going to hold you to that.
Well, on top of that, I think it was a Tigers tank top, too. And
that's
probably why.
Bright orange Tigers tank top. So.
Yeah. That's why it sticks so well in our memory.
Right. Yeah, right.
All right. Scotty and I will be back tomorrow with another prospect profile. We're going to hammer a few of these out this week for you guys, so stay tuned for that. Same time, same place. It's your team every day.
Every day.